Hi, my name is Shaquille Shaniqua Joy. Today I'm here with Kody Chambers for an exciting conversation about music and sound and his role as a composer and songwriter. So yeah, I'm excited. How are you feeling today?
I feel good. I'm excited. I haven't done too many of these interviews where people are just asking me to kind of talk about everything that I think about anyways, you know? I give these interviews, I guess, to my friends. And just without them asking for it, you know?
Yeah, but that's interesting because when you talk to your friends, you don't need to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
So before you came here, have you thought about how you would introduce yourself?
Well, I mean, I have to write the bios on my website and on LinkedIn and stuff, and there you have to say all of these titles. But I think that at the end of the day, I just say I make music. You don't want to stop and think about how you're going to make the music all the time before you make it, and you would wear a different hat depending on what's needed.
Yeah.
But I think it all kind of just fits under making music, fits under producing, I guess, because you're creating a product.
Yeah.
You're creating something where there wasn't something before.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. I think it's interesting. What I was wondering is, because you have such a broad range of things that you do within music, is there a sort of first love that you had?
In terms of chronology or in terms of ranking?
In terms, whatever. What would you prefer?
I think that my first love is just is sound and melody. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm more of a melody instrument player. My first instrument was bass, which is harmony, but it's also very much melody. And it's the same with trumpet. I transitioned into trumpet. I'm just now starting to learn guitar and starting to learn piano, because I understand it from a theoretical point of view, but from actually getting my hands on it, it's a little bit different. But that said, I think that melody is just the thing that I've always come back to. That
you were drawn to from the beginning.
Melodies, and I love the sound of chords, but I love also that they're mysterious, and I don't know that much about them.
Interesting.
I don't know too much about them.
Okay. I also want to talk a little bit about environment, actually.
Yeah.
You told me you were born in the US.
Yeah.
Lived there to a certain time, moved to Canada.
Yeah.
Grew up there. How did these different environments influence you and your sound?
I was born in Michigan. I moved around a few different cities there, and then I moved to Toronto. And in Toronto, that's when I started playing bass. But as a bass player, I wasn't interested in playing bass. I was interested in playing the melody. So I would play the bass like it was a guitar, like playing guitar solos or something on the bass. Or learning a cello suite on the bass or something.
Interesting.
Because I was just interested in melody. So then when I discovered the trumpet, I was like, oh, I was trying to play trumpet on the bass, pretty much. And I discovered trumpet because I was just searching through YouTube, and I came across some videos of Louis Armstrong. And these videos were from 60, 70 years ago or something, but just something about this instrument that wasn't really bound to lyrics. It wasn't bound to, but it also was very bound to the human physiology. It just had something so powerful to me, and I just got obsessed immediately. I kind of transitioned into the jazz world then. And when you're in Toronto, I think that a lot of people in the jazz world are looking towards New York because that's where modern jazz was birthed. So that's why I decided for my undergrad, I wanted to study in New York. So I was practicing before school, going in early, really trying to get to New York. And then I ended up going to school in New York, but I realized halfway through that I might have lost my, might have lost myself, the part of myself that actually enjoyed playing trumpet. So I went through a little bit of that crisis that I think a lot of young people do, where it's like, this is all I've known for my whole life, but I feel a little bit untethered now. But there were clues, I think, that actually I was supposed to be a producer because I was always interested in a lot of things instead of being hyper-focused on one thing.
Yeah.
So I realized that when I heard more about what being a producer was, I was like, oh, I can have an opinion about what the piano sounds like, but also the chord progression, but also I can ask somebody else to play the guitar because I'm not that good at it, and then I can be very nitpicky about the little details.
Yeah.
It sounds perfect for me. So I was
the
like,
direction of it all.
Yeah, you just kind of seeing an overview. You can go very macro, but you can also go very zoomed in. So I was like, let's give that a try. So I made some songs, and I really enjoyed that process because it felt less like being an athlete. Because the trumpet is very much like you have to train your facial muscles, you have to train your breathing, all of this stuff. It's very jazz is very mathematical, and trumpet is very physical. So it felt very much like being an athlete, but producing felt more like painting, where you can sit back and you can ask yourself questions about what's working, what's not working, what does the song want. You can incorporate, different thoughts that you have about art and kind of create your own approach instead of having to follow a pedigree. So I found that actually my brain worked a lot more like a producer's brain. So I asked the head of my school, I was like, Keller, I would love to learn how to produce, and I also want to see Europe because I've never been to Europe before. So he's like, there's a program at the conservatory in Amsterdam, you can go there. And I'm like, yeah, let's do that. So I went for a semester here. And I realized not only that, I did want to be a producer, but also that the things that you take to be truths about life, living in North America, it's not necessarily that way. But I just enjoyed being a person here. I enjoyed the friendships that I had here. I enjoyed being near the water. I enjoyed, being able to ride my bike. I don't have a license, so I enjoyed being mobile.
We just talked about that.
Yeah. And I also found that when I was studying abroad here, I was able to fall back in love with the trumpet. Because I think that when I was in New York, transitioning into your question about how place affects the music, I felt like you could not blow hard enough to knock down any of these huge buildings that made you feel like an ant. But here, I felt like the architecture was more my height, and I could play this very human instrument and feel like it resonated with the city.
Wow.
In New York, I needed electronics, but here it was more analog.
That's
I felt
beautiful way of I would have never expected that type of answer in relation to environments. I thought I don't know, I always have perceptions on what people would say, but this is really interesting how even architecture, so concrete, can affect the way you want to make music.
I think it was architecture, but it was also when I came here as an exchange student, I didn't tell them that I was doing a jazz degree. I didn't tell anybody I was a trumpet player. I would go out to jam sessions and stuff, but I wasn't marketing myself as a trumpet player. So anytime that I played, it was just because I wanted to play. Which I think gave me the space to kind of re-expand and contextualize what the trumpet was in my life. And also how to play it.
So you came to focus on production?
Yeah.
And then it made you fall in love again with the trumpet? Can I say it like that? It's
a different type of love when it's the second time. Because, you grow up, the trumpet was a certain tool to kind of get to New York and to, I don't know, be good at something. You want to be good at something growing up. But then I get to Europe, and I feel like these are the upsides of the instrument, these are the downsides of the instrument. You kind of see it more for what it is when there's not the pressure of having to be good at it.
Very true.
When you're a musician, I think that a lot of the time you're hyper-focused on how well you're actually playing that instrument.
Yeah.
But when you're a producer, you're thinking about how it fits into the context of a song.
True.
So you don't play as much when it's not needed. So I guess I made peace with the trumpet. And I was able to see it more how it could fit into my life.
Yeah.
As not the whole of it, but as a part of it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you say, because earlier you told me that what I see now is also that you look at it from different angles, because you like wear all of these hats. Like, I'm also assuming that it might be more challenging to create because you're thinking from so many different angles, which can be beneficial, but I'm assuming also challenging sometimes?
I think it depends on the project.
Yeah.
You know, it also depends on, like if I'm doing personal work or if I'm doing commercial work, it depends what the reason is that I sit down behind my computer and start to make something. I don't think that it's a bad thing to have a lot of different ways to go about it, because a lot of the time I like to start out not even really thinking about how the song is going to sound. Like, I love to go to the Stedelijk and look at a piece of art and try to understand what speaks to me about this piece of art, or do research about an artist and why they paint the way that they paint. And try to understand, okay, can I use that same process to make music? Is there something there that's universal? So I guess it's looking at, seeing if I could pull universal techniques into a new context. But of course, I sometimes sit down and nothing comes out. Yeah. And then it doesn't help that I'm not super specialized, because I wish I could just play a guitar and just, but I can't. You know, I have to sometimes look up how to voice certain chords, or I have to like record this chord, then stop, then record the next one. Depends. Yeah. So I think that it's equally as important to kind of know what you can't do that well.
Very much. Very much.
And then you look at it like a research project. Yeah. And you learn something after. Do
you approach it like a research process and like project, in the sense that you actively go out to look for inspiration, or how do you find inspiration? Does your inspiration come in waves? Because you just said sometimes it's also like, you know what I mean? Yeah, I think that like there are months that I feel more creative and months that I feel less creative. But when you're like, I've just started making music for a living for the first time in my life. It was always something that I just did because I loved it. But now I make music for ads and for short films and whatnot. Sorry to interrupt you, but did it change your perception? Yeah. Or did it change the experience for you? It changed some experiences. I still have I think that like my artist self still is pretty similar, but I know how to make something. If I need to make something, I can make something. Because when you're on a tight deadline, it doesn't really matter if you're inspired or not. You have to make something. Okay. So you have to understand, how can I make this story better with music? How can I understand what it is that's needed and do it? And a lot of that comes from really close listening. Yeah. Listening to the reference material very closely, listening to what the director is talking about very closely, and trying to translate it. So I think that's a bit more on the trade end of things. But when you're making songs for yourself, you're not thinking as much as a tradesperson as you are just kind of, why does this song have to exist? Who is this benefiting by me? Do you think like that? Because I sometimes feel like I was in this interesting meeting where we had a conversation about why should artists have to explain for who they are making something to, let's say, funding, like a platform that hands out funding. Yeah. And there were some artists saying like, I don't understand why I have to explain to you for who I'm making it. I'm making it because I'm an artist and I want to create and like process my feelings or research or energy into something through a medium. So I'm curious, like, do you have someone in mind when you create? I don't think I think there are two audiences, right? There's the audience, why should I have to explain it to people? But for me, it's like, why to myself, why am I going to go through the effort of making this, you know? Like, to get through a project, I really, if I'm starting it, I'm like, what is special about this for me? I think that... But still, it's for you. Yeah. First, right? I think it's for both, because another thing that I felt alienated when I was
fully a jazz musician, because I think that a lot of modern jazz music isn't made for people in the general public a lot of the time. It's for people who are also studying jazz or have been listening to jazz for a long time.
Or knowledgeable.
And there's something beautiful about that for sure, because you're able to get very detailed in the colors that you pull out of it. But at the same time, I think that I don't like the feeling of not being able to relate to people through music.
It's more of a like thinking of your intentions, right? Like why you create something and for whom. We talked a little bit about like sometimes people not knowing why they like something and why not.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting as well. And you mentioned something that I also like. You said that curating is a big part of anything that you do, maybe also as a producer.
Yeah.
In what way, like, can you explain to me, like, what you mean by that? Like, that curating is a part of your work, and in what way?
I think it's like, you can even look at it fractally. It starts as a curation between different sounds, and it could be a curation of different chords. Because when I just play you one chord, it might give you a feeling, but if I play you one chord and then how it resolves to the next chord, and then a third chord that raises a question, and then a fourth chord that increases the tension, and then a final chord that almost the tension is broken, and then the last chord we resolve, that's curation. It's also storytelling.
Yeah.
So you can think about, creating songs in terms of curating the chord progression, in terms of curating the sounds. Say, why does this kick sound good with this snare? I don't know. Maybe it could be a million reasons.
Yeah.
That's curation. It's how things work in relation to each other.
Yeah.
It's how songs relate to other songs, if you're thinking about sequencing of a project. It's thinking about how the visuals relate to the song. It's creating a universe, or a small universe. I mean, not like to sound very artsy-fartsy, but I think that it's about creating an experience by using things that you feel fit together to tell a statement, so that it's three-dimensional. So I think curation is all about just decision-making.
Yeah, and I can imagine that I was actually wondering if that is something difficult for you, because if you have so many choices, also toward you work as a composer, also when it comes to advising on what music to use for, let's say, film, things like that. And you made an interesting comparison when we were talking earlier about how you see an editor more on a level at like a composer, and then a director more like an artist in a way. And you are on both ends, right? So it's also curating in different ways. Do you have a preference, or is it the fact that you're doing both that keeps you kind of going
I love both.
informed? Yeah.
Because I think it's kind of similar to what we were speaking about before about being a tradesperson versus being an artist. They're both, I think, valuable, and also both can benefit about knowing how the other is done. I would not be able to be an artist if I didn't have the background as a musician. Some people can, but for me, it's about the instruments, and it's about kind of taking what I've learned from other parts of my life. But to go into the editor comparison, I think because you were saying that you had a friend that is an editor, but she felt like she was not able to tell her own story with it. She's a technician to be able to tell the director's story. I think that the art there, and where I found the correlation between that and what I do as a composer for ads, is that you have to have really an empathy to who you're collaborating with.
Yes.
And an empathy that's also heightened by a skill set. So you understand what's needed in order to make this person's vision come to life. And you have to have the skills to be, no worries. And you have to have also the skill set to be able to actualize that And if you don't have that skill set, you have to have just the interest to go super deep into the source material.
Yeah.
So I think a director is about genesis. You have to create something that was not before. Either that, or you're working from a script sometimes. But as an artist, it's very much about creating something new, even if it's not groundbreaking. You're creating the rules that everything abides by.
Yeah.
So you have to have the opinions on everything.
Yeah. You mentioned a little bit about your synesthesia, but how do I, as someone that doesn't have it, let's say, how do I have to imagine it while you create and while you are in your creative process?
So if I were to tell you right now, think about blue loafers.
Got it.
Do you see that?
Yeah.
So that was an image triggered by words, but like for me, when I'm making music or listening to music, it's images and sort of almost like architecture and structures that are triggered by sounds. So it's not necessarily triggered by specific notes. Like I don't have perfect pitch. I can't tell you that like an A sounds red or something. But when I hear the timbre of an instrument, or when I hear the volume of a sound, or when I hear just kind of the way that it's shaped, I can't help but think about it like an object. So when I'm creating a song or a composition, I'm really thinking about the way that these different objects look and interact with each other, and the balance between them, and kind of, it just gives me a different lens that I can use when I'm making music.
Yeah, and that also happens when you listen to someone else's music or sound in general?
Yeah, anytime I'm listening to either sound or music or anything. Not as much, I guess, with like nature sounds, but mostly with intentional sounds, like with music or sound design or these type of things.
Interesting. You said something about listening to music at the same time.
Yeah.
But then if you're wearing if you're wearing headphones and you want to listen to it at the same time, if we both only wear one, it's not like the full, it's not the perfect sound.
It's like looking with one eye.
Exactly.
You know, then you don't get the three-dimensionality of it.
Exactly. Do you have the same with listening to music on high quality speakers or things?
For sure.
Yeah.
I think that audio quality is very important, and you can record things intentionally using different fidelities. When you fit these things together, it creates a certain collage. So if you're listening on a high fidelity speaker system, you're able to hear all of these intentional decisions made by the artist. So whenever I'm listening to music, I try to listen on as high quality of a system as I can, just so that I can hear these little tiny differences.
Yeah, the nuances.
Yeah, because when you're making music, you put the nuances in there.
Yeah.
It's painstaking over every little detail.
Yeah.
So to listen to it, whenever I make a song and I show my mom, I'll be like, Mom, can you please listen on headphones? Not just off your phone.
Oh, I feel like it's such a sin to I always imagine someone is putting so much love into their music, and then someone listens to it on a phone speaker. I like to feel it in my body in a way.
Yeah.
And you can only have that feeling if you have a good speaker that
100%.
You know what I mean? That gets the bass and everything on a level that you can feel it rather than just hear it.
It's like watching a movie, but you're going like this in front of the screen while you're watching, and you just can see half of the picture. You miss so much context.
That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's if you can listen high quality, 100%, you're just going to get so much more meaning out of it.
Yeah. Do you feel like you can ever kind of let go of the fact that music is your world and your job and it influences everything you do, I can imagine. So when you go to the movies or to a restaurant or to all of these places, do you catch yourself always paying attention to what is the sound in the space, or how did they pick the tracks for this film?
At the movies, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's what my dream is, to score films. I really want to make music for films.
Yeah.
Because what we were talking about with the classical music, it's non-linear. You're not making something that's in a set form. You're making something that is supposed to kind of provide the emotional subtext to whatever story is being told. You're creating architecture that the scene lives inside of, almost. Yeah. So that's just where I see myself, what I see myself being drawn more towards these days. Beautifully said. I think this is a great note to end on. I want to thank you so much. Thank you. This has been beautiful. I could talk on for another hour or more, probably. Let's do it. Cool. Thanks so much. Thank you.